Okay, the meeting is now recording, and I'll take the sudeirin of this meeting of the Social Work Resources Committee held on the 30th of October 2024. I can see that we have present councillors Allison and Anderson. I have apologies from Councillor Bradley, but I can see that Councillor Dewar has attended as a substitute. Also present today are Councillors Brogan and Brown. Councillor Archie Buchanan. I can see that you have joined online. Also present today are Councillors Matthew Buchanan, Councillors Kalikis, Devlin, Donnelly. Apologies from Councillor Fagan. Councillor Falconer and Frame are also present. Also present today are Councillors Handybode, Horn, Hose, Logan, Hugh MacDonald and McClymont. Councillor Nelson? Okay, thank you. Also present is Councillors Nugent and Ross. Councillor Scott? Apologies, thank you. Also present today are Councillors Walker, Watson and Williams. We also have a number of officers in attendance, and with that I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Elizabeth Ann. Sorry, I can't actually see.
I'll move this to the screen. It's this screen here you'll be looking at for Teams. Is that any better?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thanks, Elizabeth Ann. I'll just move on to standard items. Item 1, any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Moving on to item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting, and that's pages 5 to 20. Can these be approved as a correct record? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Item 3, monitoring items. Social Work Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring to 2024 to 25. It's pages 21 to 28. And could I ask Kathleen Gowrie to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide information on the actual expenditure against budget for the period the 1st of April to the 9th of August 24, and also to provide a forecast for the year to the 31st of March 25. The report reflects the expected outturn position on expenditure and income as at the 9th of August. At section 5.1, it notes that at the 9th of August, the resource projected outturn for the financial year is a break-even. This is outlined in the service analysis statement at Appendix A, which details key highlights by service for the resource. At section 5.2, outlines that the resource is working towards managing the overall budget pressures on children and families in 24-25 and overall into 25-26. Appendices A to F on pages 23 to 28 provide details of the current projected outturn position. Detailed variance explanations and proposed environments for each service are shown in appendices C to F. I refer members back to section 2 of the report. The committee is asked to note the forecast to the 31st of March of a break-even position and to approve the proposed budget environments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kathleen. Any points, questions? No. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report? Agree. Thank you. Item 4, Social Work Resources Capital Budget Monitoring 2024 to 25, pages 29 to 32. And could I ask Graham Booth to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Again, this is our standard capital budget monitoring report and reflects the budget and spend position to the 9th of August, which is our accounting period 5. And section 3 gives the background to the report and explains the budget reflects the capital programme for the new year as reported to the Executive Committee back in June. And there's been no change to this budget since the last report to the committee. Section 5 details the financial implications, and at section 5.1 we're noting the resources total capital programme for the year of 1.027 million. As noted in section 5.3, Appendix A has the full forecast spend for the year of 1.027 million, and for information, we also note the actual spend incurred to the 9th of August of 173,000. I would then refer committee back to the recommendation in section 2 of the report on page 29, that the social work resources budget of 1.027 million and forecast spend of 1.027 million be noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Any questions, points? Nope. Do we agree to the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Item 5, Social Work Resources Workforce Monitoring, July to September 2024, pages 33 to 40, and could ask Eileen McPeak to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. So this is the standard report containing standard employment information for the resource covering the period July to September 2024. And in section 4.1 outlines the attendance statistics, and the details are in Appendix 1. So the absence rate for the resource for September was 8.8%, and that compared to a council-wide figure of 6.1%. So we are seeing an increase compared to the previous month and compared to the same period last year. And in fact, we're seeing an increase across the board in terms of council-wide absence. And looking at benchmarking data, we're also seeing an increase across the sector. So there's work ongoing in terms of helping us understand the figures and why we're experiencing absence. But the resource managers continue to follow the maximising attendance procedures and work with personnel colleagues to ensure that all the supports are in place to enable employees to return to work and that all the appropriate actions are taken. Moving on, section 4.2 to 4.5, the details are in Appendix 2. And the main points are that during the period there was 361 occupational health referrals, there was 4 disciplinary hearings, there was no grievances and no dignity at work issues raised. During the period there was 23 accidents that were recorded, and we're currently transitioning to a new HR system. So there has been a delay in categorising some of the accidents. So as yet 11 have been categorised, and the details of that are in Appendix 2. There were 22 leavers during the period that were eligible for an exit interview, and similar to the point above, the exit interview data is being collated and is not available for the period at this time, but during the transition to Fusion, the quality of the information from exit interviews will be more meaningful, and then that will be collated at a later date. So I'm referring committee back to section 2 and ask that the workforce monitoring information for social work resources covering the period July to September 2024 be noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. Any questions, points? Councillor Frame.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've got a couple of questions in this. I could maybe just ask them all together. The first one is just see if we can have an update, just to see how the recruitment has been going from the last committee, for a wee update on that. And the next one, obviously, as you've said, the absence figure has increased. And you have said that obviously the management and everything is doing as much as they can do. Is to see if there's what else we can do for that. We're going to come into the winter, and obviously we've got the increased pressures. And the occupational health referrals, what is the percentage of them, and how long are they on average of having the people having to wait to see an occupational health person? And obviously, is that an impact on the sickness? Is the people waiting for OT off sick? So is that a reflection of that as well? Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I'll just take each point in turn. In terms of an update on recruitment, I think at the last committee we had just started up in terms of there was a current home care recruitment campaign that was ongoing. And of the home care recruitment in that particular campaign, we had 215 applicants, and of them around 53 were shortlisted for interview, and then 23 then translated into successful appointments. We still have a number of vacancies that we're recruiting for, and the home care campaign is currently open again to try and attract more people in. In terms of absence actions, we are aware, as I hinted in my summary, we are looking across the council. We had somebody looking and reviewing all our policies and procedures. we're looking externally as well. I mentioned that there was some benchmarking data that was going on, so we are looking to see what else that we can do. But as you're aware, we've got a number of really good supports in terms of the supports that are there for employees, and we're doing everything that we can just to make sure employees are accessing those supports as quickly as they can. In terms of occupational health referrals, I'm not aware of any delays. You'll know that with our provider, PAM, we've got a good relationship with them, and generally in terms of people getting referred to occupational health and then the subsequent appointment and the report coming back, the turnaround is about 2 weeks. So I'm certainly not aware of any delays. Sometimes there might be a bit of a delay in the reports being produced if the occupational health practitioner may request some additional information, and they have to go back to either a specialist consultant or the GP, and sometimes that can cause a delay. But we keep track of those requests as they go on, and as I say, I'm not aware of that contributing to longer absences. But as I say, we continue to look at the figures so that we can understand what it is that we're seeing, and then we can take the appropriate actions as necessary. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Eileen. Thanks for the question. Any other points? Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I wonder if I can pursue a little bit more the resource absence figures, because a 2% increase seems to me to be pretty substantial across the year period. I just wondered if we had really any more flavour of what the problem was there. I do see that the counselling referrals have gone up. I don't know if there's an indication of greater stress or pressure or whatever, which is obviously a factor in these sort of things, but 2% seems to me we should have a bit of a clearer idea as to what the cause of that kind of is over the last year.
And that's the bit of work that's ongoing just now, because as I say, we're seeing it across the board, but yeah, it is particular within social work resources. You know, I take your point that 2% is quite a significant jump. We are still seeing the main reasons for absence as being either musculoskeletal or psychological, and again, we're using the supports that are available to us to make sure that they're open to employees. But we, as I say, we're also doing a bit of work in terms of HR. We're working with someone that's looking at all their policies and procedures, and part of that is looking at the data that's there as well. So while I don't have anything that I can put my finger on that says, yeah, that's definitely what it's attributed to, it's not that it's going unnoticed, and we're continuing to work on that.
And briefly, is there a timescale, Chair, for that report coming back to the committee out of that work? Because I think it's quite an important issue to be able to progress on this one if we possibly can.
Yeah, the intention is to bring something a bit more focused to the next committee, outlining what the supports are, and then around how we're addressing absence across the board. There was a similar report had went to the Executive Committee back in August, but we'll have something that's a bit more specific to social work resources that recognises, we've got a particular demographic across the resource, and the supports and everything that we're putting in place, as well as the work that we're doing internally.
Okay, thanks, Eileen. We look forward to the report. Alan.
Thanks, Chair. It's just on the recruitment in home care. What is the progress of the academy we set up with North Lanarkshire to recruit people into social care?
Yeah, so the Care Academy, the Lanarkshire Care Academy, so there was, you'll remember it was reported previously, there's a number of work streams that are under the overall Lanarkshire Care Academy. There's one on recruitment, attraction and retention, and they're currently looking at consolidating all the activity. They're looking at branding the Care Academy so that can also go on the job adverts, with a look to having a launch event in the new year. As I say, there's still meetings that are ongoing in relation to that. There's also quite a lot of work going in the employability space. So, for example, we have some NHS colleagues that are doing placements here, and likewise, we've got some council employees that are on MAs that are getting some placement experience in the NHS. So there's been progress in terms of some joint working, but there's still a bit more required just in terms of getting that all under the one banner and having a bit of a consolidation of all the activity that's going on.
Okay, Thanks for that. Thank you, Eileen. Any other points, questions? No? Do you agree to the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6, an update on the 2023-24 risk register and risk control plan, pages 41 to 52. And can I ask Craig to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So folk will recognise the regular risk report, and you'll see as highlighted at 3.5, we're now bringing the risk register as a standing item to every meeting. This is recognising the changing landscape in which we operate, and it's also good practice to be reviewing our risk on a regular basis. At 3.7, you'll also note that we have got very good compliance with the risk management strategy that is asked of us by the Council. You'll note at 5.6 that there's a number of risk scorings that have changed since the previous report, and whilst we have still got the very high risks on Appendix 1, you'll see even within those there's a number where the scoring has gone down, albeit there's another one where the scoring has gone up. So I'll just give a few examples of that. You'll see that whilst funding and budget remains very high risk, the score has come down slightly, recognising that we're now well into the financial year and we still are living within our budget. If you look at workforce, again, you'll see that we have reduced the risk around that, and that relates to some of the recruitment that Eileen was talking about. We have seen reduced numbers of vacancies across our workforce, and indeed we've got reduced number of vacancies in terms of our social workers as well. So that's why we've been able to reduce that risk. Likewise, we have reduced the market provider risk in recognition that that has stabilised a wee bit more than what it was in the past, albeit you'll see in terms of winter pressures, we've actually increased that risk because we now know that as we are approaching the winter months, that brings with it a range of additional pressures that we can anticipate happening, and ergo we know that despite the various mitigations we put in place, it's not always possible to predict that they will mitigate the full impact of each of those risks, or indeed how those would come into place concurrently. So that's why that risk has gone up. You'll also note in relation to 5.7 that we have all the different resources in the Council have now included a risk in terms of impact assessments. And finally, at item 7, we've highlighted a number of potential risks that we are keeping an eye on in terms of horizon scanning, and we will regularly review and monitor those such that if we do believe that they emerge as a risk, we will update the risk accordingly. Beyond that then, the remainder of the report is generally for information and demonstrating how social work resources complies with the overall risk management strategy as per the Council arrangements. And beyond that then, Chair, I would take you back to the recommendations in paragraph 2. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Any questions, points? Anybody wants to raise? Nothing? Okay, do we agree to the recommendations in section 2 of the report? Agreed, thank you. Moving on to item 7, section 27, Justice Social Work Funding, creating additional capacity, and it's pages 53 to 58. And could I ask Gillian to speak to the report? Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair and committee members, for this opportunity to present the Creating Additional Capacity paper today. The purpose of the report is to advise the committee of available Section 27 grant funding for 24 to 25 and to seek approval for additional establishment within the Unpaid Work Service and Justice Social Work MAPA team. Section 4 highlights the proposed additional establishment that will enhance capacity within the Unpaid Work Service. Section 4.2 presents the challenges in the increase of new community payback orders being made since 2021 against the number of outstanding hours the service has within each of those years. This increase in the number of orders do not match the current establishment of unpaid work supervisors and results in being unable to efficiently progress the completion of hours for some of our service users. We are seeking to create an additional 1.5 supervisor posts, which would provide 9,660 hours a year of unpaid work to be completed. Section 4.9 illustrates the increase in average caseloads for case managers within unpaid work service since 2019. In line with Social Work Scotland setting the BAR report recommendations on safe and manageable caseload weightings, we're seeking to request an additional 1.5 social work assistants, case managers. Section 5 refers to the Justice Social Work MAPA team as part of our recent service redesign in Justice. Further analysis of caseload oversight and public protection duties has informed the requirement for a team leader post to be created. Section 5.5 and 5.6 outline the dedicated tasks this team leader role would oversee. Section 6 demonstrates the establishment request, and Section 7 confirms the funding arrangements for these within the existing Section 27 grant. I conclude today's paper by asking the committee to approve the following recommendations, and that the contents of the report are noted, and that the addition of the 4 full-time equivalent posts are created within the unpaid work service and MAPA team detailed within Section 6 of this report. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Any questions, points? I'd just like to say I welcome, obviously, the additional staff and funding, which will enhance the already excellent work that goes on in relation to unpaid work time and criminal justice in general. I think they do a brilliant job, so this will only improve it. Yep.
Thanks, Chair. I've asked this before. We always seem to have a problem filling the vacancies we have, and yet we never seem to have a problem filling new jobs that are being created here. So how confident are we that we can fill these jobs if we can't fill the vacancies that we've had for a long time?
Okay, I'll pass over to Gillian.
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. I think we're seeing certainly over the last year an increase in the numbers of candidates that are applying for supervisor posts. There certainly, without a doubt, are challenges in terms of being able to, I suppose, recruit in a efficient manner, and we are trying to progress that. But I wouldn't say that we have particular issues in terms of when we have the right candidates actually filling the posts. We recognise it is a unique role, and we are developing with our Learning and Development Department additional training and support, particularly around about de-escalating challenging situations that supervisors may face while they're out in placement with service users, and also thinking about how to develop skills in that particular role as well. We also think that in the future will help support recruitment and retention going forward.
Are any of these jobs then going to be filled by current staff who's going to be promoted to supervisors, which will then create a vacancy lower down? Because the best thing always is to promote staff within who know the job, who know everything, rather than going outside. I'm just wondering what the feeling is, whether they're going to be bypassed and just advertised for supervisors, whether they're going to get the opportunity to be promoted up to that position.
I'll bring Suman in to respond to that.
So thank you. Just to confirm for all members that when we go through the recruitment process, those are open recruitment processes. So whether someone's an internal applicant or an external applicant, they'll be judged on their merits through the process, and that will determine the eventual outcome.
Thanks, Suman. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to welcome the paper, echoed the points that you had made, and also to draw attention to all councillors in social work that the payback team do excellent jobs in terms of getting their hours in. helping in the community with community groups, and we should all bear that in mind when we're working with community groups, that anything they're needing in the community, they could use the payback team, and it is a very worthwhile link. And thank you, Gillian, and take back my thanks to the team as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Yep, would agree with that. Echo those points, particularly involvement of communities. I think, and there was recently a community day. I think that went. I don't know if you want to say a couple of words about that, Gillian, how that went.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, earlier this year, between June and August, we did a series of open sessions with our communities, and that took place in Lanark, also took place in Rutherglen, and we did Hamilton, as well as East Kilbride. And this year, different from other years, we placed ourselves in the heart of the community. So, for example, in the High Street in Rutherglen, in Hamilton, next to Brandon Gate. We were also in Lanark High Street, and we also looked to be based within the East Kilbride Shopping Centre. And it was really an opportunity to engage with members of the community to promote the work that service users do, demonstrated a range of different projects, and also sought to get feedback from people in the community about what they value in terms of projects and work that they would like to see going forward. And I have to say the response was really positive. We had a number of people who weren't aware of the work that we do, and were keen to know more. We think that model works, and so we're keen to look at promoting more of these events for next year, and also thinking about how we can collaborate with our health colleagues as well for some joint events going forward in the future.
Excellent, thank you, Gillian. I don't see any other hands or anyone online. Okay. Do we agree to the recommendations in section 2 of the report? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to items for noting. Item 8, sustaining social work, children and family services. Budget recovery update, it's pages 59 to 64. And could I ask Liam to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning, committee. The purpose of this report is to bring an update on the budget challenges and the budget recovery for children and family services. We're asking for the report to be noted, but what I'm going to do is give an update in relation to the intensive family support tender and independent living programme. Section 3 just gives a background to the purpose and the reason why we're bringing the updates. You'll see that we brought an update in March and in August, and we intend to bring an update to every committee. Appendix 1, you'll see that the challenge is still there in relation to the 10.6 million overspend, which is projected for 2024-25, and that hasn't shifted. But there are some solutions, financial solutions that we've got within that, which we'll make reference to. In relation to section 4, sorry, it gives the 4 updates that we'll be referring to. The section 5, just for an update for committee, the intensive family support tender has been completed, and we've interviewed and successful candidates, and we will hope to be, we're at the final stage of that, and we hope to be within the next 4 weeks to be able to see who the preferred provider is. In relation to section 6, the transition to independent living, you'll be aware that we got the money from the big lottery and we've match funded that, and we've now started that partnership with Bernardo's, and we've got 2 young people who have moved into transition flats, and we've got another 2 young people identified. And what that is young people coming back from high-cost placements or creating capacity in their current houses. And those young people will be intensively, intensively supported to maintain their own tenancy. What we're hoping to do with that, as we said previously, is that this becomes a pipeline and a pathway for young people exiting care, and that they feel supported to do that appropriately. In relation to section 7, the social work counselling service, at the committee in August there was an agreement that that would be ceased, that service. And what we've done is, in relation to all those cases and the staff, cases have been supported and we're signposting them to appropriate resources, and in relation to the staff, they'll be part of the Switch 2 process, and that service will no longer be in operation from November 2024 onwards. Section 8 is just a reminder that we'll bring an updated report to the committee about the emergency social work service. That's one of the areas where we feel that there may be efficiencies within the system, and we'll bring a report to the committee in January for that. In relation to out-of-contract services at Section 9, you'll be aware that we agreed that the COVID befriending funding of 153,000 and the family mediation funding of 50,000 is now no longer in place, and that has ceased. Section 10 gives some of the financial implications. Again, it reiterates that the 10.6 million is still a risk for us in this financial year. But you'll see at 10.4 as well, we do have a temporary funding solution, and that's the realignment of £7.7 million from the adult and older people's budget, and that's as part of the IGIB money, the Health and Social Care Partnership, and that's given us some resilience within this financial year. That is a short-term funding solution. In relation to employee implications, for those affected with the closure of the counselling service, those staff are now on switch 2. And in terms of other implications, it's just to remind that the funding pressure that we're currently under isn't sustainable, and we do need to look at a recovery plan for that. And just an amendment at 13.2, in terms of workforce availability and capacity, you'll see from Craig's report earlier about the risk register, that's moved from very high now to high, and that's because of the successful recruitment and retention we've had as part of the redesign within children and family services. So just to take members back to the content or the recommendations, it's to note the report and to note the progress of the intensive family support tender and also the transition to independent living. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Liam. Councillor Roth.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I wonder if I could ask Liam, if it's to do with item 7, the social work counselling service. Are we confident that those families which will be affected by this will be able to source those services from other sources by the termination of our contract? Are we confident that this will be achieved?
Thanks, Councillor, for that question. I'm confident that we'll be able to signpost them to appropriate supports for that. What we have now, which we didn't have when this service was established, is we've got the schools counselling service, and at the previous committee we brought the numbers of children that are accessing that, and that's LAC children as well. It's not just kids in the community. There's also been additional funding to CAM service, and that's about looking at counselling for children that are affected that need a clinical need. And we're confident we'll be able to signpost families to any appropriate service. All the children and the families that are part of the counselling service will have an exit strategy, and we'll make sure that we can satisfy what their needs are as part of that assessment process. The numbers as they stand at the moment are now very low in terms of that exit strategy, so I'm satisfied that we've not had any adverse events or unintended consequences from those that have gone through that strategy at the moment. But if there's anybody that's aggrieved or unhappy about what we've got, we'll deal with that on an individual basis.
Thanks, Liam. Councillor Frame.
Aye, thanks, Chair. Hi, Liam. It's just going back to the point that you brought up there about the school counselling service and CAMS. Now, as we've been aware of reports previously, the high waiting time for school counselling and CAMS, has that decreased, that we're now using that as a positive, that we're going to use that to be positive for people to be using these services? Because before the waiting times were off the chart, so has that got better then?
I don't have the data in front of me. What I would say is that I'm not aware that there's a waiting time or a significant risk in relation to school counselling. I think that can be accessed quite quickly, and there's nothing to indicate that it can't be. It might be an appropriate counsellor, is maybe the delay there, but there's nothing significant that would be a risk for that. In relation to CAMS, I'm aware of, because there was recent data, that the CAMS waiting times has come down. Craig's to the right of me, he might have the actual data, so we know that the impact and the additionality that's gone into CAMS has had an impact on waiting times. I would need to say it is still high, but it's significantly less than what it was. And in relation to emergency counselling services, CAMS are responding very quickly when we've got an emergency need. Now, that's about a crisis response, and then it's looking at the long term. And if Craig actually has the data, because he's typing away here, he doesn't. But we can get the actual data for the CAMS waiting times, because it is public information. We're happy to share that with the committee.
Thanks, Liam, and thanks for those questions. Those are areas that we covered quite thoroughly when we were obviously discussing the paper in the pre-agenda meeting, and we received the assurances that you've just heard from Liam. But obviously it's a situation we can kind of get updated on and review as we move forward. Any other? I've got Councillor Donnelly. Sorry. I think you're on mute, Mary.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just, I would welcome the paper, but one of the points that I would pose to Liam is that these children would have attachment issues because they've been going from residential care. So attachment might be a big issue for them, which the counselling, and if they're getting CAMS and they're getting the counselling through the schools, then that is good. But one of the points that I was actually interested in, I don't know if this is a possibility, Liam, can the children give us feedback from how they've felt the integration's gone from residential care to supported to independent living? At some point, would that be a worthwhile exercise that we could ask for, or am I asking for the moon?
Councillor Donnelly, you're not asking for the moon, and in relation to the big lottery funding, because it is a big lottery, we've got a requirement to report back, and the experience of the young people in that transition is exactly what we will be reporting back on, and we'll look at how we do that as independently as possible. In relation to even the experience of the intensive family support tender, we need to know what the experience is of children and the families in relation to, because we're going to be delivering services differently, and that will inform us about what future services should look like. But for the Bernardo's one in that transition, there definitely will be. It's very challenging for young people. These are very isolated young people, sometimes described as intensive supports that are needed. I'm trying to think of language which is positive, but the system has not supported them over their lifespan, and actually going into independent living is a very fearful factor for them. So we need to make sure that we get feedback from them so that we get the best, not only for this group, but for future groups going forward. And once we've got an outcome for that, we will feed that back. At the moment, it's only 4 children, and we can get the experience of the 4 children. But this needs to build, and there needs to be a pipeline where we increase the numbers going forward. So we'll do that at a future committee as well.
Thanks, Liam. Mary?
Thanks for that answer, Liam. Yeah, and I think it's really what my point is the attachment issues for the children, but also for the family, and getting that right, and having their voices heard, and that is very, very vital. Thanks, Liam.
Thanks, Mary. Any other? Don't see anyone online. No. Thank you. Are we agreed to the recommendations in the report? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 9, Section 11 Bail and Release from Custody Act 2024, Provision for Emergency Release from Custody, pages 65 to 74, and could ask Gillian to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to present the paper titled Section 11 Bail and Release from Custody Act 2024 and the Provision for Early Release from Custody. The purpose of the report is to update members on the release planning arrangements that took place earlier this year for certain short-term prisoners. On the 16th of May 2024, the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs delivered a statement to the Scottish Parliament that the Scottish prison service population numbers were no longer manageable, and a decision was taken to enact emergency release arrangements. Section 3.1.2 outlines the release tranches and timescales from June to July 2024. Section 4 demonstrates the swift and immediate partnership approach South Lanarkshire Community Justice Partnership took to ensuring effective release arrangements. Best practice initiatives such as the one-stop shop to offer voluntary through care support was put in place, along with pre-release housing support provided to all cases through our Shore housing service. Section 4.1.8 notes the formal Lessons Learnt event that took place on the 21st of August 2024. Whilst we are awaiting the Scottish Government report on the collective lessons learnt, I have highlighted the main areas discussed at this event. Section 5 highlights the recent announcement from the Cabinet Secretary in respect of a proposed bill for changing the release point for short-term prisoners in the future as a way of addressing the long-term and continued population challenges the Scottish Prison Service face. South Lanarkshire Community Justice Partnership will progress arrangements where required and be part of future consultations. Justice Social Work Services are working with Social Work Scotland to identify appropriate opportunities to redress the balance of custody to community-based options, and Section 5.1.5 and 6 discuss these. I conclude today's paper by asking the committee to approve the following recommendations, that the contents of this report are noted, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Any questions? Points? Alec?
Sorry, yes, it's 7.1 that indicates that the Scottish Government has said that the early emergency releases were to be resourced within existing budgets. Now, I'm quite sure there will be considerable extra workload with the people going through the system. Have we identified what it is going to cost the Council to facilitate these early releases?
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. At this point in time, no. I think we need to see the actual proposals in the bill, which I understand will be coming in November, to better understand the numbers that we're talking about of short-term prisoners, the exact early point of release, to then better be able to determine what the additional resources will be required, both not only from housing but also from third sector and Justice Social Work Services. There are additional areas of work around preventing those going into custody. I mentioned about bail supervision and electronic monitoring. The government did give additional funding in the Section 27 grant for this year and 2024 to 2025, which covered support around those areas. But I think we need to understand the full extent of the proposals in the bill before we can accurately give a picture of what those costs will look like.
Supplementary, sorry, Chair. Do you intend then to bring a report back to committee when these costs have been identified?
So what we will certainly bring it back to the committee's attention, whether that's included within the standard overall financial reporting arrangement or a dedicated report, will depend on actually what's the level of detail that's provided to us by government. But in the same way that we brought this report here today, this is a material issue for Justice Social Work Services, indeed the Council. That affects, as Gillian's alluded to already, a number of different parts of the organisation, not just the ones we talk about here. So it's important that members are cited on both what they ask of this authority and its staff are, what resources we're having put behind that, and as you've alluded to there, exactly what the implications are in terms of other provisions we've got in place. As you'll have picked up, the very fact we've been very explicit within 7.1 around the fact that we need that information from the government in terms of that process in order to then be clear ourselves about what this will require from a delivery perspective, and in order to provide transparent information to yourselves as a committee. So we will bring that back at the earliest opportunity.
Thanks, Suman. Yeah, we had also discussed that in terms of the pre-agenda meeting. It covers a range, as Gillian has outlined, covers a range of different, agencies, third sector, social work and housing, obviously, and is outlined in the paper in terms of housing. It's going to have an impact, and you're absolutely right. We need to have far more detailed information to know what those implications are. in terms of, you know, impact assessment, resources. Also, I think some of the prisoners, some of the people being released may well have more complex needs than today, and we need to be aware of that, and also what the resource implications are going to be for local authorities. So we are kind of aware of that and on top of it. Sorry, Eileen.
With that in mind, Chair, I don't mean this is a piecemeal report, it's a very detailed report, but surely if we are going to be looking at all areas, because you're right, we're sitting with a house in emergency and there's going to be big implications, say, for housing services, very big implications for social work resources, monetary and staff so would it then be that you're going to, or we should bring it back to, say, a full council? Because I think if you don't sit in this committee, if you didn't sit in this committee, although you're reading the paper, you're not really getting, you wouldn't get the flavour for it. Or even if you read the paper but you weren't here, you wouldn't get the flavour. So I think to tie it all in, it's really a full council that's required. And also at that point in time, we might, once we've read it, have to say, well, I don't know what we're going to do, and maybe bring in government sources as well to tell us where we can get money and what we can do. But I don't think it can be, when I say piecemeal, I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean, if you sit in the house and you're fine, I don't. If you sit here, you're okay. And I think it needs to be for everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Logan. That's an excellent point. So I'd refer back to my previous answer, and indeed Gillian's. We need more information from government in terms of what the expectation is here, what the ask and what the resources in the round are. Once we've had that, I think you make an excellent point about whether this, possibly more likely we should go to the Executive Committee rather than a discrete resource committee. But you'll appreciate I would need to, that would be a discussion for Chair and Vice Chair, myself, as well as the counterparts in other committees with the direction and guidance of the Chief Executive. But it's absolutely, I think it's an entirely sound point, and we'll certainly take that under advisement.
Okay, thanks for raising that, Eileen. I don't see any other hands. No. Do we agree to the recommendations in section 2? Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 10, consultation on children's hearing redesign and response, pages 75 to 98, and could ask Liam to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to bring the committee up to speed on the consultation on the children's hearing redesign response. You'll see within the report at section 3 that in May 2023, the Hearings for Children, the report on the Hearing System Working Group, referred to as the HSWG, sought consultation. No, that triggered a consultation from the Scottish Government in relation to the children's hearing and the future of the children's hearing. And we were asked as a council to respond to a consultation on the 26th of July with the deadline the 28th of October. You'll see within that we're bringing this for noting for the committee at this stage, and we consulted with the chair of the committee in relation to the response before we went in. Probably just to give a bit of a background as well, this is also part of the independent review of the care system, where the children's voices, the 1,000 voices, actually expressed their concern about their views and how they experience the children's hearing system. So much of this has been triggered by the voice of children. In relation to 3.4, you'll see the timescale that we're looking at. This is the first stage of the consultation. And in relation to the consultation that's been submitted, we'll get analysis of that across the country early 2025, and that will trigger a series of further consultations when they're looking to actually look to change the legislation or impact on that in 2027 to 2030. So it's going to cut across 2 parliamentary terms. In relation to section 4, from 4.1 to 4.6, it gives a summary of some of the activity and the responses that we put in. You'll see at 4.1, just to summarise that, they're not saying the children's hearing system is broke, they're saying it is a good system, and we still work to the principles of the Kilbrandon report. But what it has turned into is a very adversarial type approach, and what they're trying to do is move that away from adversarial to more an inquisitive inquiry type of approach for children. And that was based on the feedback from children that they felt that their voice just wasn't heard, and it became very much legal discussion and legal dispute. I would need to say that reflects the experience of social workers as well, going to children's hearings, that actually the voice of the child and the experience of the child becomes secondary to actually some legal arguments. So we welcome that that has been looked at. In relation to 4.2, in terms of proposals for the procedures within the children's hearing, there's very simple things like the use of language, which hasn't been updated, and looking at how we make that more trauma-informed. So referring to terms such as children need treatment and children are out of control is dated. We would all recognise that, and are looking at how we can make it more relevant and more trauma-informed in how we go forward. We've not agreed what that is, or it's not been determined, but it's accepted that things like statements that children are out with control is not 21st century language to be used. They're also looking as well that they feel that the voice of the relevant person, those who know children best, and that could be anybody from someone within a children's house, it could be a foster carer, an adoptive carer, the parent carer, but also the kinship carer, and they feel that the voice of people who are relevant in a children's life has become secondary within the hearing. So that's welcome that we're actually looking at that going forward. In terms of 4.3 and 4.4, I'll sum that up as a collective. They're looking at the grounds of referrals and how they use that. It's very much if someone doesn't accept the grounds, it goes through a legal process and it goes through a court process. That's not trauma-informed and it's not child-centred. And they're looking at how that can be more, again, an inquiry and inquisitive fact-finding about what the circumstances are, so that you're not re-traumatising children going through a court process. And in terms of the role of the children's reporter, they're very much independent, but it's been recognised, and there's a challenge that they've actually got more to contribute to how they can support children and actually explain the process for children and the families going forward. So again, that's a welcome development in terms of the consultation. In relation to 4.5, what they're identifying, and it's not been agreed, there was a proposal from the hearing system working group that the actual chairs should be independent and should be trained chairs. The Scottish Government haven't agreed with that, but what they've recognised is that there should be consistency of chairs going forward, so that the child doesn't have to repeat their story every time they go through a children's hearing, and with a consistent chair they can be able to sort of make that more simple for children and actually have a relationship with the child, so it's not always different people that are seen through the children's hearing. And that reflects exactly the experience of children even in the care system, where the different professionals that come in and out their life they see is quite it's unsettling for them, and it actually isn't child-centred. So again, that's a welcome development if that can be progressed. In terms of 4.6, it's important as well, it's about the legal process, and it's about how the system works against. As I've described it very much as a legal system, so it's kept within timescales, but during COVID we recognised that you could actually have temporary supervision requirements that worked well without keeping to a timescale. So it's accepted that we've had the proof of concept within that. And also what's important is the exit strategy for children. The children would remain in the system for a significant period of their childhood, and there was no actually opportunity for an exit, or people couldn't see it. So when a child is placed on a supervision order, temporary or a substantive order, we need to now consider what is the exit strategy, so it doesn't just become a child is on a supervision requirement throughout its childhood, which is not in the child's interest. In relation to employee implications, we need to wait and see what further consultation and the developments of the bill will look like. And in terms of financial implications, again, that's not known at this stage, but there will be a financial memorandum once the bill starts to develop. There's no other implications for this consultation, but it's just to refer members back to the recommendations that it is for noting. And we've got Appendix 1 shows the submission which was put in jointly between Social Work Resources and our legal colleagues. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Liam. Kirsty?
Hi. Thanks, Liam, for this report. And just to kind of emphasise, I suppose that you know, it's really good to see that the Kilbrandon principles will remain sort of overarching in terms of the children's hearing report. That's still the standard. But just to obviously echo, in terms of the children's hearings, I think sometimes there is a feeling from everybody that uses the service, including most importantly the young people, that they have become more adversarial in the last 10 to 20 years. So I think it is time for a refresh in terms of how we make sure that the child remains at the centre of the children's hearing system. The timescales, though, look as if it wouldn't be till 2030 before these any proposed changes come into play. Would that be right? Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty. I'll just echo those comments on the report. The update is very informative and helpful on this process. I don't see any... Oh, sorry, Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the paper, Liam, and I think it is going in the right direction. I was just at a conference yesterday all around the language and how we were supporting children from a trauma-informed way. So one of the points that I'm asking is at the children's hearing, Liam, is that going to be child-centred rather than the child being presented before the hearing and the adversarial way that it was in the past? Are we talking about a round table for the discussion of everybody involved in the young person's life? Would be much more tangible to getting a positive outcome on the reflection of what the child would want to go forward. Thank you, Liam.
Thanks very much, Councillor Donnelly. And yes, you probably summed up some of the challenges going forward. You'll see at 4.2.3 that there's currently, it's an obligation that a child attends a children's hearing. That can be quite traumatic for a child. And you think about it, there's an expectation that a baby is taken to a children's hearing. That child will not engage within that hearing, but that's the expectation. Similarly, you've got teenagers who are asked to always go to their hearings. And in relation to the 22-day returns for temporary or supervision requirements, what we're recognising is you're actually re-traumatising that child every time they go and hear about all the deficits in their life or their family or what they're not good at, i.e. the language used like out of control when this child needs treatment. So it's actually now looking at, there's a presumption that the child will attend, but that's where it will be discussion about is it in the child's best interest and can that child participate? And they're looking to see how advocacy can actually support the child in absence of that, so that the child's voice is always heard. You'll see that it's moving away from an adversarial approach to a more inquisitive approach. So what that's saying is that it will look at more relevant people, as we said, the foster carers, unit managers, the staff within houses. But it's actually looking at it's more a family group decision-making type discussion that takes place, which is more child-centred, child-friendly, and actually it then gets to the root of the problem as opposed to it being legal discussion that takes place. So the points you made are exactly the points that they're trying to address as part of the consultation and they're moving forward with that.
Okay, thanks, Liam. Don't see any other... Sorry? Oh, sorry. Go. Kirsty, sorry.
Yeah, just to continue from that, Liam, I think one of the really important and interesting kind of proposals is in terms of how grounds of referral are established, because from the outset, you know, that's within a family, that's within a court environment, and obviously kicks off any supervision requirement on a very much an adversarial and contentious footing. So the idea, I think, being proposed, my reading of this is that we move more to a sort of tribunal type environment. Obviously, that you know, that's, I mean, grounds of referral court hearings are private anyway, but this will obviously be much more about approaching from a position of curiosity as opposed to establishing a contentious set of facts. So that, I think, is a really important step in moving away, as you say, from this adversarial approach that we have, where it's solicitors who are engaging in the debate and discussion rather than people who are working with the children and know the children and the child themselves.
Okay, thanks, Kirsty. Any other points? Okay, no, do we agree to the recommendations in the report?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you for that. I think that is the last item on the agenda. I don't have any urgent business. So could I just thank people for attending and contributing. Also thank all the officers for their extremely comprehensive reports and informative as always. And thank Elizabeth Ann for admin support. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.